Hi, my name is John Dehlin. In 2006, I came across a Deseret News article that read that Utah leads the nation in suicides among men aged 15 to 24. And this really took me by surprise. And so I had a theory or two about why this might be. First theory I had was that too many people were being asked to choose between their religion and the people that they loved. I know that I love my religion, I know that I love my wife, and I would hate to have to choose between the two. The second thing that I kind of theorized is that too many of these young gay and lesbian men and women were being asked to engage in what's called reparative therapy. Now, I'm no expert in sexuality, but I know that not in a million years could I change myself from heterosexual to homosexual. And so I thought that might be a problem as well. I figured that the field of psychology would be the place where I could help answer these questions and maybe even find some solutions. But there are a few teeny tiny little problems that I had to resolve before I could jump in head first. The first was that I was 40 years old with a stay-at-home wife and 4 kids. Second, I'd never taken a psychology class or a statistics class. And third, I deeply feared research, and I had no funding. So how in the world was I going to be able to jump into this field? Well, the first thing I did is I found a cause. I loved gay and lesbian people. I believed that they shouldn't be committing suicide, but instead they should be living happy, fulfilled lives. And that was going to drive me towards success, or at least in my mind, that's what I thought. Second thing I did is I found 2 beautiful mentors, Bill Bradshaw and Renee Gallagher. And when we had this idea for a study, Renee said, hey, if you can find 300 people to fill this survey out that we're going to complete, I'll consider this a huge success. The third thing that I did is I used my experience in technology. I had worked for MIT and Microsoft. I knew a thing or two about technology, and I figured that maybe I could contribute something to the field with that expertise. And then finally, through my understanding of technology, I had established a podcast called Mormon Stories, where I had interviewed Mormons about interesting things, and it had an audience of about 20,000 people at the time that I decided to go into this field. So it gave me a large social network. So we put this survey together. I used my expertise in technology to build the survey and to implement it online. That was really exciting. The next thing we had to do is recruit. So I called up a reporter friend that I had, again, from my social network. Her name was Jennifer Dobner, and said, hey, Jennifer, would you mind writing a story about this study to help us find people to fill it out? So in the end, she published the article. It ran in over 100 newspapers worldwide. In addition to that, we also used our social media connections. I advertised the study through the podcast. We also advertised it through blogs and Facebook through a snowball sample. And then we contacted every LGBT Mormon community that we could find across the world. And in the end, we slightly exceeded the number of 300 that Renee was shooting for. We were able to recruit 1,615 respondents from 22 countries and 49 states and the District of Columbia, all at the cost of $0. This was the largest survey of its kind, the largest sample of a survey of its kind. How did I solve the funding problem? So many of my listeners on the podcast and friends who had LGBT family and friends were willing to donate, and donated over $20,000 to help fund my research as a research assistant. And then finally, how did I solve the problem of fearing statistics? I had such an amazing data sample that once I got a copy of SPSS, I would literally sneak out of bed at night, run down into my office, and run regressions and ANOVAs and t-tests just so that I could uncover the amazing things in these data. My wife didn't love that exactly. So I have to talk about my findings. What we found is that those who engage in reparative therapy who are LDS are 10 times more likely to report being damaged than they are to actually experience any type of change in that intervention. In other words, if reparative therapy were evaluated by the FDA, I don't think that it would be approved. The most interesting thing that we found out of all, however, was that reparative therapy through a psychologist was not the most common way that people tried to change their sexual orientation. Instead, they tried to change it through religious means, through prayer and fasting and extra righteousness. And not only that, it was far more damaging than attempts to do it through a psychotherapist. And nobody's written about this yet. We'll be the first to ever write about this topic. So have we solved the problem yet? No, we've got a long way to go. But our hope is that we're going to see a lot less suicides and depression within the Mormon community. Instead, we're going to see a lot more instances of love and companionship within the community. And most importantly, I want you all to know that if any of you want to be a researcher, all you got to do is find your passion, find a good mentor or two, and leverage those strengths you have inside of you, and you can absolutely do it. because I'm going to be a PhD at age 45. Thank you very much.